The hotel room was small, windowless, and humming with the low buzz of a hidden camera. A man in plain clothes sat at the edge of the bed, counting thick stacks of cash with deliberate calm. Outside, a team of federal agents watched every move on a grainy monitor. The man wasn't a drug dealer, he was a police officer. And what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this entire operation was a trap. The FBI had set the bait. Tonight, they were about to expose one of the largest police corruption scandals in American history. It began quietly in 2008, deep inside the San Juan field office of the FBI in Puerto Rico. Reports had been coming in for months, claims that local police officers were moonlighting for drug traffickers, using their badges and guns to protect shipments of cocaine and heroin across the island. At first, the complaints seemed scattered, hard to prove. But then, evidence began to overlap. The same names kept surfacing, the same precincts. It wasn't just a few bad cops, it was a network. The FBI decided to do something they rarely attempted. A sting operation not against drug cartels, but against law enforcement itself. They called it Operation Guard Shack. Inside a dimly lit operations room, Special Agent in Charge Joseph Campbell stared at a map covered in red pins. Each pin represented a suspect, officers, corrections guards, and military personnel suspected of selling protection to criminals. "If even half of this is true," Campbell said, his voice low, "we've got a rot in the system." The room fell silent. The agents knew what they were about to do was dangerous. Infiltrating a criminal organization was one thing. Going after the police was another. If word leaked, the entire operation would collapse, and people could die. They started by building a cover, a fake drug organization, complete with stash houses, traffickers, and controlled shipments. Undercover FBI agents posed as dealers moving cocaine through Puerto Rico's ports. The plan was simple: offer corrupt officers money to escort the drugs. Every meeting, every exchange would be recorded. Weeks turned into months as the agents carefully laid their trap. They rented apartments, filled them with fake kilos of cocaine made from flour, and wired the rooms with hidden microphones. The first officer took the bait faster than anyone expected. He showed up in uniform, service weapon on his hip, and a wide grin on his face. "How much are we talking?" he asked, sliding his cap back. "5,000, the undercover agent replied. "Just keep the road clear." The officer nodded. "Easy money." From that moment, the operation spread like wildfire. Word traveled fast through the ranks. Someone was paying big money for police protection. One by one, more officers signed up, escorting imaginary shipments, pocketing envelopes of cash, and laughing about it afterward. What they didn't realize was that every word, every smirk, every handshake was being documented. By mid-2009, the FBI had footage of dozens of officers taking bribes. Some even brought friends along, vouching for other cops who wanted in. "You can trust him," one officer said on tape. "He's done runs before." The agents watching couldn't believe how casual it had become. The badge that was supposed to represent trust had turned into a ticket for easy corruption. The FBI expanded their sting, pulling in federal resources from across the mainland. Dozens of undercover agents flew in quietly, working out of unmarked offices. Their fake drug organization grew so realistic that some of them started to forget it wasn't T-real. The operation had taken on a life of its own. Inside the bureau, tension was rising. Each meeting carried risk. Each envelope of cash handed over could be the moment the entire charade unraveled. Agents went to sleep wondering if they'd wake up to find their cover blown, or worse. Then came the turning point. One of the officers they targeted wasn't just corrupt, he was paranoid. During one meeting, he asked, "You guys sure this isn't the feds?" The undercover agent smiled. "You think the FBI's got time for small fish like us?" It worked. The officer laughed, pocketed his cash, and left. But for the FBI team, that close call was a warning. The longer they waited, the higher the risk. By early 2010, Operation Guard Shack had identified over 130 corrupt law enforcement officials across Puerto Rico. Some were uniformed officers, others were members of the National Guard and Department of Corrections. The scale of corruption stunned even the most seasoned agents. This wasn't a few bad apples. It was systemic decay. The FBI had everything they needed: recordings, photos, serial-numbered cash, and testimony. The only thing left was the takedown. It had to happen all at once. One coordinated strike to avoid leaks or panic. The operation was scheduled for October 6, 2010. They called it D-Day. At 3 a.m., black SUVs rolled out of the San Juan FBI office. More than 750 federal agents, including SWAT teams and helicopters, moved toward their targets. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Agents double-checked gear, weapons, and warrants. They knew they weren't going after street criminals. They were arresting police officers, men trained in tactics, and armed with knowledge of the system. In one neighborhood, agents surrounded a house belonging to a sergeant who had taken bribes to protect drug deals. They moved in silently, then shouted, "FBI, don't move!" The man opened the door wearing only his undershirt, eyes wide, disbelief written across his face. "You're making a mistake," he said, but the agent said nothing. The cuffs clicked shut. Across the island, similar scenes played out. Officers dragged from their beds, confused families watching as badges and weapons were seized. Some wept. Others cursed. One officer reportedly muttered, "I knew it. I knew this day would come." By sunrise, 133 suspects were in custody. It was the largest police corruption bust in FBI history. Helicopters circled overhead as news cameras captured convoys of handcuffed officers being led into federal buildings. The image was surreal. Lawmen turned criminals, the enforcers of justice now facing it themselves. Inside the command center, Agent Campbell watched the footage on multiple screens. The exhaustion on his face was clear, but so was the gravity of what they'd done. Years of work had led to this morning. "We cleaned house," one agent said. Campbell nodded slowly. "No," he replied. "We just opened the door." The aftermath was chaotic. Puerto Rico's police force, already struggling with low morale and high crime, was thrown into turmoil. Public trust collapsed overnight. Newspapers ran headlines calling it "the day the badge fell." Citizens wondered how many other officers were still out there, unpunished, untouched. In court, the evidence was overwhelming. Recordings showed officers laughing while taking money, planning routes for drug traffickers, and even advising criminals on how to avoid checkpoints. One officer told an undercover agent, "Don't worry about the uniforms, they're all in on it." The jury didn't take long. Convictions came swiftly. Dozens of officers received federal sentences, some for more than 15 years. But even after the trials ended, questions lingered. How had corruption spread so deep? Why hadn't anyone inside the department stopped it sooner? Some said poverty and low pay drove the officers to desperation. Others argued it was greed and arrogance, the belief they'd never be caught. For the FBI, Operation Guard Shack was both a victory and a warning. They had exposed the corruption, yes, but they also saw how fragile trust could be when those sworn to protect it became the threat. Years later, one of the undercover agents who worked the sting gave a rare interview. He sat in shadow, his voice altered to protect his identity. "You don't forget faces," he said quietly. "We shook hands with them. We laughed with them. Then we put them in cuffs. You start wondering who's really the good guy in this line of work." Puerto Rico's police department has since undergone reforms, new leadership, stricter oversight, and federal monitoring. But scars remain. Some of the arrested officers left behind families who never recovered. Others insisted they were framed, victims of a setup too elaborate to fight. And still, somewhere in the archives of the FBI, the original tapes from Operation Guard Shack sit in sealed evidence lockers, silent witnesses to a time when the protectors became predators, and the hunters became the hunted. The footage doesn't lie. It shows badges traded for bribes, oaths broken in the dark, and the chilling realization that corruption doesn't always come from the shadows. It sometimes wears a uniform. When the lights in the FBI operations room finally went out that night, the agents stood in silence. They'd done their job. But no one felt like celebrating, because beneath every exposed crime, another truth waited in the dark. In the battle for justice, trust is always the first casualty.